The early morning sun spilled through the airport terminal windows, glinting off polished floors and hurried travelers. Flight 482 to Washington, D.C. was boarding, passengers clutching tickets and carry-ons, exchanging tired smiles and polite nods. Among them, a woman in her 30s maneuvered through the crowd with quiet confidence, her leather jacket draped casually over her arm. She wasn't running late, yet she moved with purpose, each step precise, almost rehearsed. She carried no large bag, only a small satchel slung over her shoulder and a worn paperback in her hand. Most onlookers assumed she was just another business traveler, maybe a consultant, or someone simply enjoying the occasional flight. She reached seat 7A, a window seat near the middle of the plane, and set down her satchel. Flight attendants passed by with practiced smiles. "Good morning, ma'am. Can I help you with that?" one asked, noting the lack of carry-on baggage. She shook her head politely, slipping into her seat with a calm that seemed to radiate reassurance. There was nothing extraordinary about her appearance. Chestnut hair tied neatly at the nape of her neck, glasses perched lightly on her nose, an unreadable expression on her face. Yet there was something in the way she held herself, a subtle rigidity, a sense of readiness, that made the flight attendant pause for just a fraction longer. The engines roared to life and the plane slowly taxied to the runway. Outside, the terminal shrank as the aircraft lifted, climbing toward a sky streaked with gold and pink clouds. Passengers fidgeted, murmured to one another, and adjusted there. A child in row 6 pointed at her, whispering to his mother, "Mom, look at that lady. She looks important." She caught his glance through the reflection in the window and gave the faintest of smiles, polite yet distant, before turning back to her book. Ordinary travelers might have dismissed it as simple curiosity, but there was more behind her calm exterior than anyone realized. As the plane leveled off at cruising altitude, she adjusted the angle of her seat and opened her book. She didn't read the words, they were a placeholder. Her mind wandered to other skis, other planes, and other missions. Years of experience flashed before her, missions where she had faced mechanical failures mid-flight, sudden enemy engagements, and high-speed dogfights. She remembered nights flying through storms, clouds thick and unrelenting, instruments flickering with warnings, her hands steady on the controls, heart racing but calm. Turbulence on this commercial flight would have been trivial in comparison. Yet, even as she recalled those moments, her composure remained absolute, betraying nothing of the intensity behind her memories. Around her, passengers slept, read, or fidgeted with electronic devices. No one noticed her subtle scans of the cabin, the way her eyes swept briefly over the cockpit, the flight attendants, the passengers. A habit ingrained by years of training, a vigilance born of necessity. Even now she remained aware of everything, every motion, every shift in the plane's trajectory, every flutter of nervous hands. She carried an aura of quiet authority without needing to assert it. Those who observed her closely felt an instinctual respect, though they could not identify why. A soft chime from the cockpit signaled a minor announcement. "Ladies and we are now cruising at 32,000 feet. Enjoy your flight." The passengers murmured acknowledgments. She allowed a subtle nod, a gesture almost imperceptible to the untrained eye, signaling her acknowledgement of the flight path, the conditions, and the crew. In her mind, she reviewed everything she had ever learned about vigilance, risk, and precision. Today, she was just a passenger. But the sky would remember her differently. If anyone knew how to watch, they would know that she was someone who had once commanded it with unmatched skill. Even the smallest gestures mattered. She adjusted her satchel, smoothed the sleeve of her jacket, and leaned slightly against the window. To the casual observer, she was ordinary. To those trained to notice, every movement was deliberate, every posture purposeful. Her presence on Flight 482 would go largely unremarked upon, yet the echoes of her history, her skill, and her quiet command of any situation hovered invisibly, like the currents of wind high above the earth. Seat 7A was ordinary. She was not. The hum of the engines had become a familiar lullaby for most passengers, a steady vibration that signaled routine. Yet just past mid-flight the plane shuddered violently. A ripple of tension ran through the cabin. Drinks sloshed over cup rims, laptops wobbled precariously on tray tables, and passengers instinctively gripped armrests. A collective gasp echoed through the rows, murmurs of concern bouncing off the walls. Even the flight attendants, trained to mask worry, exchanged fleeting glances. But in seat 7A she remained unshaken, calm as ever. Her hands rested lightly in her lap, her fingers brushing the edge of her book, poised and ready. The turbulence intensified, throwing the plane into abrupt dips and climbs. A young mother clutched her child tightly, whispering soothing words, while an elderly man muttered prayers under his breath. Panic was spreading like wildfire, yet her composure acted as an invisible anchor. She closed her eyes briefly, inhaled deeply, and unconsciously ran through calculations only she could process: wind speed, cabin pressure, aircraft tilt, engine response times. Her mind flashed to moments far more treacherous, skis that were not merely turbulent, but hostile, laced with danger, where lives depended on precision and split-second decisions. In one memory, she was flying a fighter jet over an unfamiliar desert night, blindingly dark, instruments flickering with conflicting readings. A sudden alarm screamed through the cockpit. Her heart had raced, but her mind moved faster. Every maneuver executed flawlessly, every calculation instinctual. The memory was sharp, electric, reminding her why ordinary turbulence on a commercial flight was almost laughable. Still, she remained vigilant. Her eyes scanned the cabin not in paranoia but as habit. Every motion mattered. Every shift in the air, every subtle change was data to process. A nervous flight attendant approached her, voice soft and hesitant. "Ma'am, are you okay?" She opened her eyes, meeting the young woman's gaze. "I'm fine," she said, voice calm but carrying the weight of authority. It was a simple statement, yet it carried reassurance that no one else in the cabin could offer. Passengers noticed her stillness, the certainty that radiated quietly, and whispers rippled among them. "How can she be so calm?" a man muttered. Others stared, curiosity mixing with awe, though no one dared ask more. They only sensed that the woman in 7A was different. Outside the oval windows, the clouds swirled violently, as though mirroring the chaos within the cabin. She traced their movement briefly, noting patterns invisible to ordinary eyes. Her attention flicked toward the cockpit, where pilots adjusted controls subtly. Though she appeared to read a book, her mind was active, alive with instinctive observation. Every movement, every flicker, every sound in the plane registered. Years of experience taught her to notice what others could not: subtle cues, impending danger, unspoken threats. In the wrong hands, turbulence could be trivial. In the right hands, it was an early warning system. As the plane leveled, passengers began to relax slightly, though anxiety lingered like static in the air. She leaned back, eyes scanning the cabin one final time, assessing, observing, cataloging each person's reaction. She felt a familiar thrill, the quiet satisfaction of calm amidst chaos, the subtle proof of mastery. She had been trained for scenarios far more intense. Systems failing mid-flight, engines faltering, missiles on her tail, split-second evasions at impossible speeds. Yet here, turbulence was just a reminder, a faint echo of the storms she had conquered in the past. Nearby, a man whispered to his companion, "Who is she?" "She's unshakable." A child tilted his head, studying her as if expecting her to move, to act, to do something extraordinary. She smiled faintly, almost imperceptibly, acknowledging him without revealing the truth. To the casual observer, she was calm, competent, maybe even serene. But those who understood, those who had flown, fought, or observed greatness, would recognize the signs immediately. Seat 7A carried history, skill, and untold stories, hidden beneath the ordinary veneer of a passenger on a commercial flight. The turbulence subsided gradually, leaving the cabin in uneasy calm. Drinks were righted, trays adjusted, and murmurs quieted to whispers. She exhaled subtly, a small relaxation of posture, yet her vigilance never wavered. For her, this flight was routine. For others, it was a window into something extraordinary, an invisible aura of mastery, a hint that one of the most skilled pilots in history was quietly sitting among them. Yet none of them knew the full story, the legend that sat silently, observing and waiting. The cabin had settled into a quiet rhythm after the turbulence, passengers adjusting to their seats, some dozing, others scrolling on their devices. Yet an undercurrent of tension lingered, invisible to most but palpable to her. Her gaze flicked subtly toward the cockpit, where the pilot's movements were precise, professional, but slightly tense. Something had caught their attention. A faint hum of static preceded soft, clipped bursts of radio chatter. Most passengers ignored it, assuming it was routine communication with air traffic control. She, however, recognized the cadence immediately. It wasn't ordinary, it was a signal. Her eyes narrowed slightly as she listened, processing every syllable. The chatter was encrypted, a code embedded in plain English, barely perceptible to untrained ears. Her training kicked in automatically, years of experience decoding signals and recognizing call signs flowing through her mind. Somewhere, high above in the upper reaches of the sky, a squadron of F-16s had been monitoring flight patterns. The pilots had heard the code and recognized it instantly. It was a call sign rarely spoken aloud, reserved for exceptional circumstances, one that immediately marked her presence. The F-16 squadron above was vast and precise. Engines roared in the thin atmosphere, slicing through clouds with perfect synchronization. From their perspective, Flight 482 was just another civilian jet at cruising altitude, yet a small anomaly had drawn their attention. The code whispered over the airwaves acted like a beacon. The young pilots glanced at each other, disbelief and excitement flickering across their faces. This was no ordinary passenger. This was someone they had only read about in historical documents and reports. Recognition was instantaneous. Action was inevitable. On the plane, she sipped her coffee as if nothing were happening. Her calm exterior masked a pulse quickening just enough to remind her senses that the sky was alive with activity. She felt the subtle vibrations of the engines and noticed slight pressure fluctuations through the cabin, signals invisible to most. Her instincts were alert, each second a silent calculation. Outside the window, thin streaks of clouds moved in patterns she could almost read like lines on a map. The jets above were converging, adjusting formation imperceptibly, their movements precise yet deliberate, guided by the recognition of one name, one passenger in 7A. Passengers nearby were oblivious to the significance of the moment. A young man tried to get a better look out the window, snapping photos of clouds and contrails, unaware that the machines outside were about to pay tribute. A child in row 6 pressed her face against the glass, fascinated by streaks cutting the horizon. She allowed herself the faintest smile, acknowledging the silent observers without revealing the secret. The ordinary world continued within the cabin, but above, extraordinary recognition had already begun. Inside the cockpit, the pilots adjusted dials and made subtle changes in altitude, acting on instinct. They communicated in clipped phrases over secured lines, alerting other F-16 pilots to the anomaly. One of the younger co-pilots leaned forward, eyes wide. "Ma'am, you hear that?" he asked, unsure if he should say more. She simply nodded slightly, her calm unshaken. A lifetime of experiences had taught her that actions spoke louder than explanations. Outside, the jets had begun to peel off from formation, their engines a distant roar against the backdrop of clouds, signaling something remarkable. Back in the cabin, ordinary passengers continued their routines, unaware that the sky above was responding to the presence of a legend in disguise. She did not look back at them. She did not need to. Her focus remained on the subtle ballet of the jets outside, the invisible conversation between sky and pilot. Every detail mattered: the angle of their wings, the speed of approach, the formation shift. In these moments, the past and present converged. One solitary passenger had become the center of attention for some of the finest pilots in the Air Force. A sense of anticipation built quietly, unnoticed by the casual observer. She allowed herself a single thought: The salute was coming, precise and deliberate, executed by machines and pilots who understood her history without needing an explanation. The turbulence had been trivial, the radio chatter a precursor, and now the sky itself was about to recognize her presence. For everyone else, the flight seemed ordinary, routine. For her, it was a reminder of a life lived at the edge, a life marked by skill, courage, and secrets only a few were privileged to know. Above 32,000 feet, the roar of F-16 engines cut through thin air, a symphony of power and precision. The lead pilot squinted against the sunlight glinting off the wings of Flight 482. From his vantage, the civilian jet seemed ordinary, just another dot against the sprawling horizon. Yet something about it, the angle, the subtle movements, the timing of ascent, triggered a spark of recognition he could not ignore. He adjusted his visor, scanning the passenger windows, catching a fleeting reflection of a woman who exuded calm authority. His heart skipped a beat. "That's her," he whispered into the headset, voice taut with disbelief. Around him, fellow pilots tilted heads in confusion. "Who? Lead, repeat," one asked, uncertain. He didn't need to explain. The name had already traveled through encrypted channels, each pilot trained to recognize historical figures whose exploits were legendary yet rarely witnessed firsthand. This was one of them. The quiet passenger in 7A was not just any traveler. She was a living legend, a fighter pilot whose missions had shaped national security decades earlier. Recognition was instantaneous. Formation shifted subtly. 12 jets moved in perfect synchronization, peeling off from their initial path with breathtaking precision. Engines screamed in harmony, creating a trail of white contrails that stretched across the sky like streaks of paint on blue canvas. For the lead pilot, the motion was instinctive, almost ceremonial. Years of training, countless hours in simulators, and real combat experience all funneled into this one precise acknowledgement. Each jet mirrored the other's movements flawlessly. This was no ordinary salute. It was a display of reverence, respect, and admiration executed at Mach speeds. Inside the cabin, she continued to sip her coffee, eyes casually scanning her surroundings as if she were unaware of the unfolding tribute. Passengers leaned toward windows, curiosity piqued by the streaking contrails above, assuming it was a rare aerobatic display or a passing squadron unrelated to them. She allowed a faint smile to tug at her lips, a subtle acknowledgement to the unseen pilots outside. To anyone else, it was nothing. To the pilots above, it was a moment of historical significance, a bridge between past achievements and present recognition. The lead pilot's heart raced, tempered by decades of composure. His hands adjusted throttle and flaps instinctively as he maneuvered closer to create the perfect visual alignment. The squadron's coordination was impeccable. Each jet's wingtip tilted at precisely the correct angle, engines modulated for uniform speed, every movement choreographed to ensure that the salute was flawless. He could feel the weight of history, the rare honor of executing a tribute for someone still living, whose achievements had been confined to classified records. Below, Flight 482's passengers were captivated by the streaks of white against blue. A young man with a camera lifted it instinctively, snapping photos of clouds and contrails, unaware that his lens had captured something extraordinary. A child pressed her face against the window, pointing at the sky, squealing with excitement. She glanced at the child and gave the faintest nod, almost imperceptible, a gesture that could have gone unnoticed but carried centuries of unspoken acknowledgement. She did not need to explain. The sky was speaking for her. Squadron maintained formation, circling the plane, each maneuver precise, calculated, deliberate. The lead pilot allowed a fleeting moment to observe her profile, the calm, assured posture, the faint tilt of her head, the way she held her book as if the world beyond the cabin did not matter. To the untrained eye, she was ordinary. But for him and the pilots around him, every line of her stance, every subtle gesture, spoke volumes about the woman they were honoring. Disciplined, courageous, unshakable. As the jets continued their carefully orchestrated tribute, A sense of awe filled the lead pilot's chest. This was recognition at its. No cameras, no headlines, no public accolades, just the acknowledgement of peers who understood excellence, mastery, and history. For the woman in 7A, this was invisible yet tangible, a secret salute known only to those who could truly comprehend her past. And somewhere in the depths of the sky, the past and present converged in perfect harmony, paying tribute to a living legend. The roar of 12 F-16 engines reverberated through the thin air above 32,000 feet, a synchronized thunder that cut through clouds and sky. The squadron had split from formation, peeling off in precise arcs, contrails streaming behind them like brushstrokes across a living canvas. Each maneuver was calculated to the millisecond, each tilt of the wing deliberate, designed for a single purpose. To honor the woman quietly seated in 7A, the lead pilot's eyes never left her jet, scanning for the faintest signs of recognition, while the others mirrored his movements, flawless and unerring. Inside the cabin, passengers noticed unusual motion through their windows. Contrails streaked the sky at impossible angles, planes tilting and banking with astonishing precision. Cameras clicked, phones lifted instinctively, yet nobody fully grasped the magnitude of what they were witnessing. Some whispered, "Is this a drill? An air show?" A child's voice squealed with delight, pointing at the sky, but even she could not comprehend the history unfolding above them. The woman in 7A maintained her composure, a faint smile playing at her lips, as if she were witnessing a ritual she had long expected. The lead pilot carefully maneuvered closer, adjusting his formation to create the perfect visual symmetry for the salute. The F-16s tilted wings in unison, a silent acknowledgement visible only to those who could truly understand. The precision required was extraordinary. Any miscalculation at this speed could be catastrophic. Yet the squadron executed each maneuver flawlessly, a testament to both skill and reverence. The salute was not for cameras or headlines. It was for the woman, the legend who had once commanded skis far deadlier than this, whose history was both celebrated and classified. Outside the plane, the sun caught the edges of contrails, igniting them into a golden ribbon against the deep blue sky. Passengers leaned forward, mesmerized by the display. A man muttered, "I've never seen anything like this." Others snapped photos, eager to capture the spectacle. But only a few understood the true story. A group of elite pilots, the finest in the Air Force, had broken formation for one solitary passenger. Seat 7A was ordinary, but she was not. She was the reason the sky itself had shifted in tribute. She allowed herself a subtle nod, acknowledging the salute without drawing attention. Her fingers brushed the edge of her book, resting lightly as her eyes tracked the arcs of the planes above. Years of experience had taught her that actions spoke louder than explanations. She had received countless accolades in her past missions, some public, many classified, but nothing matched this silent acknowledgement, executed by men and machines who understood what it meant to honor true mastery. This was respect beyond words, beyond ceremonies, beyond politics. The squadron continued their precise arcs, the jets tilting and banking, maintaining perfect alignment. The roar of engines created a distant rhythm, almost musical, underscoring the significance of the tribute. Each pilot knew the woman's history, the missions she had flown, the lives she had saved, the impossible maneuvers she had executed in high-stakes operations. To honor her in this moment was both privilege and duty. Even the youngest pilot felt a profound reverence, a quiet awe that went beyond recognition into something more spiritual, a salute not just to skill, but to courage, to history, to legend. Back inside, passengers remained unaware of the full weight of the moment. Some speculated about celebrities, military exercises, or air shows, their guesses falling comically short. She did not correct them. Ordinary comprehension was unnecessary. The planes above were speaking in a language only those trained in skis, precision, and history could understand. Her heart swelled faintly, tempered by the calm she projected, a reminder that this acknowledgement was hers alone. shared silently with the skis, the pilots, and a few who truly understood. The final formation loop completed, engines screaming in unison before leveling out, contrails fatting slowly into the horizon. The salute was complete, precise, breathtaking. Passengers marveled at the aerial display, some clapping, some taking pictures, none fully grasping the magnitude. She sipped her coffee again, calm, collected, acknowledging the invisible tribute in her own quiet way. Seat 7A remained ordinary. She was not. The sky had recognized her. And for a fleeting, perfect moment, history bowed to a living legend. As the roar of the F-16s faded into the distance, a ripple of awe and curiosity settled over Flight 482. Passengers leaned forward, peering through the windows at the fatting contrails, whispering excitedly to one another. "Did you see that?" a young man asked his companion, eyes wide with disbelief. "Was that an air show?" Others snapped photos and videos, trying to capture the moment before it disappeared. The child in row 6 pressed her face against the glass, pointing at the sky, squealing with delight. The spectacle had captured everyone's attention, but none could comprehend the full story. Seat 7A remained calm, serene, as if nothing extraordinary had occurred. The woman lifted her coffee to her lips, sipping slowly, eyes scanning the cabin in her usual unobtrusive way. Flight attendants approached her discreetly, their curiosity barely masked by professional smiles. "Ma'am, are you all right?" one asked, lingering a moment longer than usual. She inclined her head slightly, a subtle nod of acknowledgement. Her calmness seemed almost unnatural after such an astonishing display. Passengers whispered about her composure, some staring openly, others surreptitiously trying to catch her expression. Nearby, a businesswoman murmured, "Who is she? She didn't even flinch. Incredible." Another passenger added, "She must be military or maybe a pilot." Speculation spread like wildfire. None of them could imagine the truth, that the woman in 7A was a decorated fighter ace whose classified missions had shaped the defense of the United States and whose presence alone had prompted the F-16 salute. The plane cabin buzzed with quiet energy, a mix of curiosity, awe, and admiration, though none could articulate why their fascination felt so profound. She remained outwardly detached, yet internally her mind catalogued every reaction. Each glance, each whispered comment, each nervous gesture was a data point she absorbed. Years of experience had taught her to notice the smallest details, the subtle cues revealing fear, excitement, or recognition. The passengers' awe was genuine, yet uninformed, and she allowed them their illusion. To explain the truth would disrupt the delicate balance of ordinary life and extraordinary history quietly intersecting. She let the secret linger, as she always did, quietly bearing the weight of her legacy. A flight attendant hovered briefly, eyes flicking nervously between the passenger and her clipboard. "Would you like anything else?" she asked, voice low, tinged with curiosity. The woman shook her head with a polite smile. She didn't need to order anything. Her mind was already elsewhere, tracing the invisible threads of recognition that had stretched from the cockpit to the sky above. She knew the pilots who had executed the salute would report back, their admiration recorded in quiet, classified logs. The world would never see what had truly occurred, but that mattered little. Other passengers began murmuring amongst themselves, speculating wildly. "Maybe she's an astronaut," one guessed. "A secret government agent," said another, eyes wide. A teenage boy whispered to his friend, "She must be someone important like a hero." None of them realized how close their guesses were, yet none could fully grasp the magnitude. She allowed the mystery to linger. The ordinary passengers could enjoy their speculation, unaware that they were witnessing history quietly acknowledging a living legend in their midst. Outside, the sky had returned to its placid blue, the contrails fatting like memories. The extraordinary had occurred and receded, leaving only awe and curiosity behind. Inside the cabin, the effect lingered, a subtle shift in energy, the sense that something remarkable had brushed against their ordinary lives. She leaned slightly back, folding her hands over her book, the faintest smile on her lips. She had witnessed countless missions, accolades, and tributes, but this quiet acknowledgement from the sky, observed without fanfare, carried a satisfaction unlike any other. As the plane leveled out and the hum of the engines became a gentle vibration, she allowed herself a single thought. Recognition did not require applause or cameras. Some honors were private, understood only by those trained to see. Today, the sky had spoken and the pilots had understood. The passengers remained in quiet wonder, oblivious to the magnitude. Seat 7A appeared ordinary. She was not. And as Flight 482 continued toward its destination, she carried the invisible tribute with her, a secret acknowledgement of skill, courage, and history that would remain untold. As Flight 482 began its descent toward Washington, D.C., the cabin settled into a tentative calm. Passengers adjusted and tray tables, some stretching, others still pressed their faces to the windows, watching the sky where contrails had once streaked like white ribbons. The F-16s were gone, disappearing over the horizon, leaving only the memory of their precision and power. Yet a quiet energy lingered in the cabin, an invisible acknowledgement of something extraordinary. Whispers passed among passengers. "Did you see that?" one asked. "Who was she?" muttered another, glancing at seat 7A. The question buzzed in the air, unanswered. The woman in 7A remained composed, a picture of calm as flight attendants moved through the aisle preparing the cabin for landing. One attendant paused, glancing at her out of the corner of her eye, curiosity barely concealed. "Ma'am, you seem so calm. Was that turbulence okay?" she asked softly. She smiled faintly, polite, but said nothing of the salute outside. Ordinary explanations sufficed. No one could imagine the truth. Years of experience had taught her to never announce her own accomplishments. Legends, she knew, never needed to. Recognition came quietly, silently, and often privately. Nearby, passengers speculated freely. "She must be military," one said, pointing subtly. "A pilot, maybe," suggested another. The child in row 6 leaned toward her mother. "Mom, she's important, isn't she?" the girl whispered. She looked at the child and gave the faintest nod, an acknowledgement that spoke volumes without revealing anything. Ordinary observers could guess, but they would never know the full story. She had lived a life few could imagine, missions classified, decisions made under extreme pressure, lives saved with skill that bordered on instinct. Today, those experiences manifested as calm, control, and subtle authority. The flight attendants whispered quietly among themselves, curiosity growing. Some speculated about intelligence work, past combat missions, or secret government operations. She answered politely to any interaction, maintaining composure and charm, but offered no details. Her restraint only deepened the mystery. Years of living in plain sight had taught her that recognition from strangers mattered little. The only acknowledgement that truly counted came from those who understood the magnitude of her history. The F-16 salute was that acknowledgement, a tribute invisible to the world, but meaningful to those who had orchestrated it. Inside the cockpit, pilots adjusted instruments, monitoring the approach and communicating with the tower. Even here, her presence was noted. The young co-pilot, still processing the morning's events, glanced toward her reflection in the cockpit glass. She's legendary, isn't she?" he asked quietly. The lead pilot didn't answer, only nodded subtly. Some things were better left unsaid. Recognition did not require explanation. The young co-pilot's awe was enough. The history, the missions, the accolades, all unnecessary to convey the truth. She existed in a rare space where legend and anonymity coexisted seamlessly. The plane descended steadily, engines humming a gentle, steady rhythm. Passengers secured their belts, unaware that they were in the presence of someone whose history had shaped the skies above them. Whispers continued, speculation growing, but no one could grasp the full extent. She allowed them the illusion of mystery, blending into ordinary life while extraordinary recognition lingered invisibly. Every gesture, every subtle shift, projected calm authority. Ordinary travelers saw a composed passenger. Trained eyes saw a woman who had mastered chaos, who had faced death in skis far more dangerous than this, and had emerged unshaken. Minutes before landing, she allowed a small, private acknowledgement of satisfaction. The F-16s had saluted, history had recognized her, and she had remained unshaken. The cabin's whispers, the curiosity of crew and passengers, were trivial compared to what mattered. Legends did not announce themselves. They simply existed, acknowledged by those who understood. Today, the sky had remembered her, and that was enough. She returned to her book, folding hands over its cover, the faintest smile still lingering. Seat 7A appeared ordinary. She was not. As the runway came into view, the plane touched down smoothly, tires squealing briefly on asphalt. The ordinary world resumed around her. Cameras clicked. Passengers murmured excitedly. She remained calm, collected, invisible in plain sight. The F-16 salute would be logged, admired in classified reports, whispered among pilots, yet never publicly attributed. She had arrived quietly, and she would depart quietly, leaving only awe, whispers, and curiosity behind, a legacy understood only by those trained to recognize it. The wheels of Flight 482 kissed the tarmac smoothly, tires squealing briefly, the landing executed with flawless precision. Passengers stirred, collecting belongings, murmuring among themselves. The sky was calm again, the contrails of the F-16 salute fading into memory. Cameras clicked. Phones recorded fleeting glimpses of the horizon, but none captured the significance of what had occurred above them. Ordinary travelers filed toward baggage claim, their conversations animated with speculation and excitement. Who had been the woman in 7A? Why had 12 fighter jets broken formation in her honor? The answers remained unseen, classified, and profoundly private. She gathered her small satchel and stood, folding her jacket neatly over her arm. Flight attendants approached politely, some lingering with curiosity visible in their expressions. "Thank you for flying with us, ma'am," one said softly. She nodded, a subtle, gracious acknowledgement, nothing more. No explanation, no fanfare. She moved down the aisle with practiced ease, each step measured, deliberate, confident. Passengers turned slightly, stealing glances at the calm, composed woman whose presence had somehow shifted the energy in the cabin. Speculation buzzed quietly around her, yet she did not address it. Legends never did. Outside, the terminal lights glimmered as she walked toward the jet bridge, blending seamlessly with the crowd of travelers. Cameras mounted on nearby airport observation points captured the steady movement of passengers, but none recorded the history she carried. The F-16 pilots had already filed their reports, a silent tribute noted in logs that few would ever see. The military world recognized her. The general public did not, and that had always been the way she preferred it. Her legacy existed quietly, invisible yet undeniable, honored by those trained to see it. A young boy tugged at his mother's sleeve, pointing toward her. "Mom, she's important, isn't she?" he asked, eyes wide with awe. She allowed herself a faint smile, a small nod acknowledging the intuition of a child. No words were necessary. Recognition had been granted in the sky above, and it was enough. Ordinary passengers speculated wildly. Celebrity, military, intelligence operative, astronaut. None guessed the truth. She had commanded deadly skis, flown missions that shaped history, saved lives in situations most could not imagine. Yet today, she had remained unseen, ordinary, blending with a crowd that would never understand. She passed through the sliding doors, stepping into the bustling airport concourse. People brushed past, unaware, oblivious to the silent weight of history walking beside them. Her footsteps were measured, confident yet quiet. To the world, she was just another traveler arriving at her destination. To those who understood, she was a living legend, a master of skill and courage, whose presence had commanded respect in the skis without a single word spoken. She carried the invisible salute with her, the acknowledgement of men and machines who had known her worth long before this flight. Behind her, the airport staff returned to routine. Passengers hurried to baggage claim, still discussing the spectacle outside. Some speculated, some dismissed, none comprehended. The ordinary world had resumed its rhythm, completely unaware of the extraordinary truth that had brushed against it. She paused momentarily near the exit, glanced back, then turned, moving into the crowd. The F-16 salute, the whispers, the awe, it all existed now as a memory, an invisible honor, and a secret she alone carried. She disappeared into the sea of travelers, anonymous yet recognized in a way few could ever hope to be. Legends often walked among the ordinary, leaving impressions only to those trained to understand. Today, she had been honored silently by pilots who revered her past, by machines executing precision impossible without experience and respect. No applause, no headlines, just acknowledgement, and that was all she needed. Seat 7A had seemed ordinary. She had never been. As the terminal doors closed behind her, the story remained untold to most, yet etched invisibly in history. The F-16 salute, fleeting yet perfect, had marked her presence. She moved forward, carrying legacy, skill, and courage into the ordinary world, unseen and unforgettable, a quiet hero whose recognition belonged only to the sky and those who truly understood. The crowd around her never realized what they had witnessed, and that was exactly how it was meant to be.